Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice this time for this single game showdown slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. Thursday Night Football, Carolina Panthers, Chicago Bears. Yes, this is a real game, but we're here to give you strategies, picks, and tips for both FanDuel and DraftKings to help you win your contest. Listen, it's not the best game in the world, but I'm making this video. You're watching this video. Clearly, we both like pain. But also, we like the chance to win some money. So that's what we're going to try to do tonight in this gross game. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner. In this video, I'm going to talk about the injuries that impact the slate, and there are quite a few. Low-risk lineup construction tips for those 50-50s, double-ups, and head-to-heads. And then some high-risk GPP strategies to help get you to the top of those big contest leaderboards that have the big prizes. So let's start with the visiting Carolina Panthers and discuss their injury report first. Now, DJ Chark, one of their wide receivers, is out with that elbow injury. Officially doubtful, but basically means he is not going to play, which means we're going to see Terrace Marshall, who a lot of the dynasty community liked coming out of college, take over that wide receiver 3 role. He filled in some last week when Chark was in and out of the lineup. And in the only game Chark missed for Carolina this year, Terrace Marshall played 90% of the snaps. That was way back in week 1. And if we scroll back, can we go back far enough? Yeah, scored 4.3 DraftKings points. Has some talent. It's going to play outside receiver. And at just $400 on DraftKings becomes a clear value play. Anytime we can get a guy who's going to see the field 50% plus of the snaps, they're in play at that cheap price tag. And Marshall likely exceeds that number by a good margin tonight. So he is certainly in play. For Carolina's depth, they are missing Stephen Sullivan, which doesn't sound like a lot. But he's been playing a decent amount of snaps lately. Their tight end, their number 2 tight end. That does open up more snaps for Hayden Hurst and Tommy Tremble. So this is a showdown slate, and it's a gross one at that. So just keep that in mind as Stephen Sullivan is indeed out. Who else we got here? And then Carolina is missing some defensive pieces. Their star pass rusher, Brian Burns, he is out tonight. He will not play, so that certainly is a big boost for the Chicago offense. They're missing starting cornerback C.J. Henderson. That's not great. And then their safety, Xavier Woods, had just one limited practice this week. We'll see if he suits up. He is questionable. I would lean more doubtful based on that practice participation, but at the very least, at least 2 starting players at important positions are out on defense for Carolina, and potentially 3. So certainly boost Chicago's offense. Now, speaking of the Bears, they have a couple injuries that we need to monitor, guys who we thought were coming back potentially, but are not. First one is Justin Fields. He is doubtful. He will not play tonight. They're probably expecting him back next week after this long mini bye of 10 days of rest sitting here on Thursday night. He will not play. Tyson Bagent will start once again, get his 4th straight start for the Bears. And as we saw last week, a little bit of rushing upside with the 70 rushing yards, which was interesting to see against the Saints. Khalil Herbert, who full practice every single day this week, is on injured reserve. Beat reporters expected him to be activated. Basically, the Bears waived 2 guys from their roster to open up spots to activate guys from injured reserve. Let's go down to Khalil Herbert. And there are 3 guys that they're looking to activate. Special teams player, Equanimeous St. Brown, the wide receiver, and then Khalil Herbert. However, there were national reports this morning, right before I started recording, that Herbert would not be activated in time. He'll stay on injured reserve for 1 more week, which likely means those 2 spots go to St. Brown and the special teams player. So Herbert's going to be out, which means we get another lead workload for Deonta Foreman, who's priced up now at $8,600. And then it was kind of weird because Roschon had been the number 2 running back, Roschon Johnson. Let's find him. Where is he? Let's type him in. There he is, $3,600. And then in the first half last week, he only saw 5 snaps, and Darrington Evans, their other running back, saw 5 snaps. And there were tweets and speculation that Roschon had been demoted to the number 3 running back. But then he outsnapped Darrington Evans 15-1 in the second half. So not really sure what that was about. I haven't seen any reports. If you guys have seen anything, let me know in the comments if you've seen anything definitive on why Roschon didn't play as much last week, or if there's any Evans discussion. So, but it's something to keep in mind as we look to get different on tonight's slate. And on Chicago's defense, this won't impact the player pool whatsoever, but this is just the 4th time this season out of 10 games that they'll have their entire starting secondary, their corners and their safeties. So a little bit of a bump to their defense as well. So if we look at the defensive injuries and the injuries in general, definitely a benefit to Chicago tonight instead of Carolina. So, all right, let's talk about low-risk contests now, 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads. Just have to beat half the field to double your money. We know the drill. Now, I prepped all my notes based on reports yesterday that Khalil Herbert was going to be in for this game, and built all the discussion points around that topic. Had to scramble here in the last hour or so to reconfigure some things, because if Khalil Herbert was in, we would have had, and I just want to show you this alternate universe game script. If Khalil Herbert was in, we would have had potentially the easiest low risk slate since the invention of the showdown format. We could have captained Adam Thielen. We could have played both quarterbacks in Bryce Young, Tyson Bagent. We could have played both starting running backs in Chuba Hubbard, in Khalil Herbert, 4,200. And then we could play Terrace Marshall for our final spot. Now, Chuba Hubbard, in case you haven't been watching Panthers games, and good for your health if that's the case, he is taking over the starting job for the Panthers, has outsnapped Miles Sanders something in the ballpark of 90 to 95 snaps to 35, has been the lead back there. So he is rightfully priced at 8K tonight, and Sanders down at, what, 5K, 5,200? Yes. So this would have been the low-risk core. And even on FanDuel, let's go over to FanDuel, if this works. There we go. And we could have done the same thing. Herbert, 77K per player. We could have fit in Terrace Marshall here. Unfortunately, that is not the case, and we will not be doing this tonight because Herbert is likely going to be out. Now, again, national reports rarely, sometimes they're wrong, so just monitor the 4 p.m. IR activations from Chicago side. If Herbert is somehow in, all this remains in play. So instead, if we're going to play Deonta Foreman, he is not as pricey on FanDuel. So 11.5, 5,500 per player. Can we make this work? How much is Marshall? I think Marshall's 6K. Marshall's 7K even. So you could potentially do this, right? 5,500. I think it's a little better here on FanDuel. You would have to punt this final position. Who we got here? Tight end. It's gross down here. So probably not the best, right? You have to sacrifice one position. DraftKings, Foreman is priced up at 8,600. Let's go up. Foreman. Can't even make this work if we play Adam Thielen in the lineup. And Adam Thielen is the best projected player on DraftKings tonight with the PPR scoring and how well he's been playing so far this year. I know he had a dud last game, but in general. So you can't really do this. You could, if we captain the cheapest player of this group, which is Chuba Hubbard, and then we play Adam Thielen. Still can't do that. That leaves us with negative $1,400 in salary. You could captain Terrace Marshall and fit all these guys in. That's one option. I don't hate it. There are some $200, $400 plays where that doesn't make a lot of sense, but if he's going to be on the field for a lot of snaps, sure, that could potentially work. More than likely, you might just want to take one of these guys out of your lineup. And, yeah, good luck figuring out which of these, all four, honestly, not that great plays, you want to take out of your low-risk lineup aside from Adam Thielen. So, all in all, low risk now with the Herbert news is not very viable tonight. I would suggest you avoid those types of contests. Now, if you can find some no badge head-to-heads, you can find some really soft small field double ups. You can go for it. See if you can find some people with some terrible lineups, and we know that those are out there. Or if the Herbert news changes by 4 p.m. Either way, this looks more and more like a high-risk GPP type of slate, which let's talk about now. Let's talk about some angles and some strategies for those types of contests. Let's clear the lineup here. And this is a close spread. Chicago just a small favorite here. We expect builds on both sites to be relatively balanced, maybe slightly more in Carolina's favor now, just with the Khalil Herbert news. Still expect, I don't really think anyone's going to go in there and make Carolina heavy lineups, right? Just based on their team. Nor will they do the same thing with Chicago. So we know that when the field does one thing, we can pivot our line of construction to another type. So one way to get different tonight is to just build Carolina heavy lineups. That's 5 guys or 4 guys from Carolina on one team, and 2 from Chicago, 1 from Chicago. Same goes for FanDuel, 4-1 type of builds. Or flip it, have a bunch of Chicago players and just 1 or 2 Carolina players. The field won't do that as much. So if you believe that type of game script is possible, you can certainly build that way as one type of advantage in the lineup construction department. Instead, let's talk about some other low-owned guys, some other angles we can attack in addition to the lineup construction stuff. And our model really likes Hayden Hurst at lower ownership. Let's bring up Hayden Hurst here. He's in that dead zone here, 4K, 4,500 to 6K. No one's going to play Hayden Hurst. No one's going to play Miles Sanders. Both of their ownerships are under 20% and much closer to 10% overall on DraftKings. Hurst has been losing some snaps lately, even put up a 0 2 weeks ago. But with Sullivan out, that should open more snaps for both Hurst and Tommy Tremble. And the model likes him in this matchup here. So he's a great low-owned differentiator. You can play chalk around him, and he can just be your one pivot, your one guy that's lower owned. So Hurst is an option here. Same goes for Tommy Trimble too. He's not going to be popular by any means, and he's 2,400. And honestly, he looks like the more athletic guy at this stage in his career than Hayden Hurst. So Tommy Trimble, another option. Both tight ends for Carolina are the guys we're looking at for differentiators. Both defenses will be extremely popular tonight. Extremely is relative, but compared to guys around them, we expect both the Bears and the Panthers to eclipse 20% total ownership on DraftKings and probably FanDuel as well. If you look at the FanDuel pricing and we see Bears defense just 9,500 against this Carolina offense. Carolina just 8,500 against this Bears offense. So we expect both of the defenses to be more popular than the kickers in most types of contests. So while we know that in these lower total games, this game has a total of 38 points, historically, in the range of 60 to 65% of optimal lineups include a defense in this type of slate. So I think there are two options here. And a very comparable game is that Pittsburgh and Tennessee game we just saw on Showdown that I did a video for here on YouTube. And I think one way is to play a defense in every single lineup that you make. Don't play two, but play one in every single lineup and try to take advantage of the fact that defenses are more likely to be optimal in these types of game environments and get overweight on the field there. Or, as we saw, what actually happened in the Pittsburgh and Tennessee game is that the kickers outscored the defenses at much lower ownership. So you could play either way. You could pivot away from those defenses, and you could play Cairo Santos or Eddie Pinheiro and get a big ownership discount at relatively the same price on both sites. We see Bears 4,600, Santos 5K, and especially Santos at 5K. We've seen, I've talked about it here the last couple of videos, ownership really decreases once these kickers get up to 5K or more. That's not going to be any different tonight. So Santos, big ownership discount from the Bears defense. Same thing with Pinheiro and the Panthers defense, as Pinheiro is $400 more expensive. So kickers over defenses as a pivot, or go really heavy on defenses. Those are the two options I think I would recommend tonight heavily if you're building multiple large field or even multiple small field GPP lineups. And then if you're looking at the Terrace Marshall situation, again, he's a guy that we do like to play in smaller contests, given his likely workload, his likely snap count, likely availability. So no problem with that. And we see this all the time, and I meant to mention this in the last video. You see one of the biggest selling points for playing a $400 player is the option and the availability to fit in all of the studs. So right, if you play Marshall, I'll just show you what I'm talking about here. You play Marshall, you can play Thielen, Young, Bajent, Foreman, and then that gives you four studs to play, right? Yes, in theory, this looks good on paper. In reality, not very often do all of the studs hit. Some stud takes away from the other. It's more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns, or vice versa. And especially with the Panthers and the Bears, right? The term stud is used very generously with these two teams. So while yes, it allows you to pay up for these guys, the likelihood is that not all of these guys will meet expectations. So I think smaller contests and low risk contests, yes, it certainly makes sense. But in larger contests, and if you're looking to get different, you can only you play maybe three of these guys instead of four and play a more balanced approach. And the other thing that we see on these games with lower totals, the average salary remaining is much higher than games with higher totals. I mean, it would not shock me to see a lineup with $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 left over be the optimal lineup tonight. And while it may look gross and it may be difficult to comprehend to hand build a lineup like that, easily that can happen tonight. Deonta Foreman is one of the most game script dependent backs in the league right now. If Chicago gets down somehow, that's more Roschon, that's more Darrington Evans. Can you imagine a scenario where Hayden Hurst, Santos, Bears, Pinheiro outscores the $8,600 Deonta Foreman? Yes, that's very conceivable. So don't be afraid to leave salary tonight, especially if you're using a defense or kicker. And I think more balanced in larger contests and even in the bigger, smaller GPP. So, 2, 3, 4, 500 players or more. If you're playing the 100 players, 150, 200 players, you can consider Marshall. I like that a lot. He's going to play. But again, you're looking at playing multiple studs in a game where, in all likelihood, the multiple studs, not all of the studs are going to pan out. So building balance, leaving salary is truly the way to go on a slate like this with a lower total. All right, one final note for you FanDuel folks out there. Don't want to forget you guys. And on a slate like this, again, very, very similar to the Pittsburgh and Tennessee slate. And it worked out very well because on that slate, we recommended the underperforming wide receiver Deontay Johnson as a player to include in your MVP pool to fade the quarterbacks and the running backs, play the gross MVPs, and in addition to the high volume wide receiver MVPs. I think the same can be said tonight, right? Would it shock anyone if these quarterbacks didn't end up in the optimal lineup, especially at the optimal MVP? No. Foreman, I think he could have a huge game. I think he's a guy that I'm going to include in my player pool, and especially smaller contests. If this game stays competitive and Chicago handles business and has the lead or it's competitive, then Foreman could have a huge game. But if he gets game scripted out, again, that can happen, then it's very possible that we see a very low scoring game and whoever scores one of the touchdowns ends up in the optimal MVP spot. Hell, we saw a Chicago game last year where Dante Pettis was the optimal MVP. Remember that guy? Yeah, wide receiver 3 for the Bears. So don't be afraid to play Mooney. Who else? Jonathan Mingo, Terrace Marshall, Hayden Hurst, Cole Kmet. Those types of guys at MVP in larger FanDuel contests. I think I would prefer that approach. Now, it's a very high-risk approach. You're going to lose more often than you win. But when one of those 1 to 5% MVPs hits, you're going to make a lot of money. So if you're building 20 to 150 lineups, that would be my strategy. If you're playing smaller GPPs on FanDuel, you don't have to get that crazy. You can play Foreman, Bajent, Bryce Young, Chuba Hubbard, guys like that, Thielen even at MVP. It's for those larger contests where you want to get crazy because historically, those have been the types of strategies that have been very profitable for these game environments. So that'll do it for this video. Appreciate you watching. As always, again, I may have missed something on the Roshan Darrington Evans news. If you guys have seen something, drop a comment below. If you have any questions, you can always comment on the video below. I will actually be around today. It wasn't around Monday, but I will be around all day today. So if you have any questions, drop it on the video below in the comment section, and I will answer it and get back to you. If you have any opinions, takes, predictions, put it in the comments below. We always like to hear that as well. If you're not subscribed to the channel here on YouTube already, please do so. It's free to do. Helps us out. The more subscribers we get, that's fantastic for us, right? I don't think that's a secret. But it also helps you out because we go live for NBA contests. Generally, every single day. We had some tech issues yesterday, but every single day it is planned that we go live for NBA DFS, if you play that. And we do these videos every Monday and Thursday. More short slates are coming as the holidays approach. And then we have our main slate videos throughout the weekend. So subscribing on YouTube is the best way to get notified whenever we drop these video content pieces. And it gives us a thumbs up. We appreciate it. It helps us out, lets us know that you like the video and want us to continue to make more of these. Our daily plug will drop later this afternoon with top plays, rankings for individual contest types, lineup construction tips for various contests on FanDuel and DraftKings, overall slate notes. Link is in the description. Again, early this afternoon. Model will be updated with ownership. We had Herbert projected in for our ownership earlier. That'll change, so ownership will be modified throughout the day, projected ownership. And our lineup builder is up and running, build up to 300 lineups on FanDuel and DraftKings using our optimal lineup criteria. So that'll do it. Brian Jester, Occupy Fantasy, thank you, and good luck in this Bears and Panthers showdown slate.